With Philolaus of Croton we enter peculiar chronological territory. He is a contemporary of Socrates and Democritus. By strict dating, he is not a Presocratic in the literal sense. Yet we include him in this volume because his thought does not break with the earlier tradition, but brings it to completion. Philolaus was the first Pythagorean to commit the school's doctrines to writing. His book, On Nature, is the principal source Aristotle used for understanding Pythagoreanism. In its pages we find a cosmology that combines limiting and unlimited principles, number as the structure of reality, and a bold astronomy. For the first time, the Earth is not at the center of the cosmos. Instead, it revolves with the other heavenly bodies around a central fire. Today we explore the work of a thinker who built the bridge between Pythagoras and Plato. With Philolaus, Pythagorean philosophy takes a decisive turn. It is no longer a matter of repeating the master's teachings within the closed circle of a community, but of setting them out, systematizing them, and putting them in writing so that others may discuss them. The question Philolaus poses is as simple as it is profound. How does order arise? What is needed for the multiple, the indeterminate, and the chaotic to become a cosmos, a structured and harmonious world? The problem has two faces, which Philolaus addresses in his book On Nature. The first is metaphysical. Two kinds of principles exist, he says, the unlimited, ápeira, and the limiting, péras. Neither can generate order on its own. The unlimited without limits is pure dispersion. Limits without anything to limit are empty. The question is how they combine. The second dimension is cosmological. If the universe is the result of that combination, if it is number and harmony, how is this reflected in its structure? Where is the Earth? Is there a center? Philolaus offered an answer that still astonishes us with its boldness. And he did so, for the first time in the history of Pythagoreanism, in a book intended for the public. With Philolaus, the state of the sources changes compared to most Presocratics. We are no longer dependent exclusively on indirect testimonies. Philolaus was the first Pythagorean to break the school's secrecy and publish a book. It was titled On Nature, and over 20 verbatim fragments survive from it. Along with those of Empedocles and Democritus, it is one of the most extensive corpora of Presocratic philosophy. To these fragments we must add the testimonies of Aristotle, who in the Metaphysics and On the Heavens discusses Philolaus's doctrines in some detail. We also possess valuable references in the later doxographers. Diogenes Laertius devotes a brief passage to him in the 8th book of his Lives of the Philosophers. Staius, in his anthology, transmits several of the most important fragments. And Aetius, in his Opinions of the Philosophers, collects reports on his cosmology. The relative abundance of direct sources makes Philolaus a privileged figure within Pythagoreanism. We do not have to reconstruct his thought from echoes. We can read him, in part, in his own words. Philolaus lived at a turbulent moment for the Pythagorean school. Around the middle of the 5th century BCE, the Pythagorean communities that had spread across Magna Graecia suffered a violent persecution. Their meeting places were burned, many of their members killed, and the survivors scattered across the Greek world. Philolaus was among them. He went into exile in Thebes, where he taught for years and where he probably wrote his book. He is a contemporary of Socrates and Democritus, but he belongs to a very different intellectual world, that of the Pythagorean tradition now struggling to survive. In this context of dispersion, Philolaus made a decision that would change the history of Pythagoreanism. He published its doctrines. He broke the secrecy that had protected the school for over a century and set down in writing the teachings on principles, numbers, and the harmony of the cosmos. Thanks to this gesture, Pythagoreanism ceased to be an oral tradition confined to a closed community and became a philosophy that could be read, discussed, and criticized. Among his pupils was Eurytus of Croton, of whom Diogenes Laertius tells us that, together with Philolaus, he taught the last Pythagoreans in the city of Phlius. Plato, on one of his journeys to Italy, came into contact with them and acquired Philolaus's book, which would become one of the principal sources for his cosmology. Where did the ideas Philolaus systematized come from? The most immediate influence is the oral Pythagorean tradition, the doctrine of numbers as the principle of all things and harmony as the structure of the cosmos. But Philolaus did not merely repeat. He incorporated elements of Anaximander's thought, whose concept of the unlimited, the ápeiron, echoes in his notion of the ápeira, the unlimited principles. And behind all this one senses the legacy of Milesian cosmology, the conviction that the universe can be explained through a unifying rational principle. Philolaus gathered all these threads and wove them into a system of his own, the first that Pythagoreanism offered to the world in writing. We have reached the doctrinal core of Philolaus's thought. Of the more than 20 surviving fragments, 2 offer us the key to his entire philosophy. The first reads, "Nature and the cosmos was harmonized from unlimiteds and limiters, both the whole cosmos and all things in it." The second, briefer, announces, "Concerning nature and harmony it is thus." In these sentences is encoded one of the most ambitious systematizations of Pythagoreanism. Philolaus distinguishes 2 kinds of principles that constitute all reality. On the one hand, the unlimiteds, ápeira, the indeterminate, that which has no form or shape, that which extends without end. On the other hand, the limiters, péras, that which gives form, that which defines, that which establishes edges and contours. Neither can generate the cosmos on its own. The unlimited without limits is pure dispersion, chaos without order. Limits without anything to limit are empty abstractions. A third element is needed to unite them. That element is harmony. Harmony is not a separate principle, but the force that joins the unlimited with the limiter, that produces the fit, the joint, the proportion. The entire cosmos is nothing other than the result of this original harmonization. And how does harmony operate? Through number. Philolaus here takes up the central intuition of Pythagoreanism and carries it to its fullest expression. Harmony is proportion, and proportion is expressed numerically. Each thing in the cosmos is what it is because it embodies a determinate numerical ratio. Musical intervals, the octave, the fifth, the fourth, are merely the most evident cases of this universal law. But what holds for music holds for everything, for the stars, for the elements, for the soul itself. Number is not an abstraction we apply to the world. It is the very structure of the real. The boldest application of these principles was Philolaus's cosmology. Until then, all Greek cosmologies had been geocentric. The Earth occupied the center of the universe. Philolaus broke with this tradition. At the center of the cosmos stands not the Earth, but a central fire, which he called the hearth of Zeus. Around this fire revolve 10 celestial bodies. The counter-Earth, an invisible body Philolaus postulated to complete the sacred decad, the Earth, the Moon, the Sun, the 5 known planets, and the sphere of the fixed stars. The Earth is not the motionless center of the universe. It is one more star revolving around the central fire. For the first time in the history of Western thought, a non-geocentric cosmos is proposed. And the reason for this structure is mathematical. The decad, the number 10, is the perfect number. The cosmos must contain 10 celestial bodies because that is the proportion that expresses universal harmony. Philolaus did not merely assert that there exist unlimited and limiting principles united by harmony. Like any systematic thinker, he offered reasons for holding that this triad is necessary and that none of its parts can be eliminated or reduced to the others. Let us examine the 3 main grounds that articulate his proposal. The first ground is an acknowledgement of limits, in every sense. The unlimited, the ápeira, cannot generate order by themselves. Imagine an extension without edges, without contours, without internal differences. There is nothing in it to separate one thing from another, nothing to define a here as opposed to a there, a this as opposed to a that. It is pure indeterminacy. If the cosmos had arisen only from the unlimited, there would be no cosmos at all. Only an indifferentiated continuum, a formless chaos. For things to exist, defined objects, structures, proportions, something is needed to cut out, to delimit, to establish boundaries. That something is the limiters, the péras. Without limits, no order is possible. This argument recalls the critique Anaximander had directed at Thales. The principle cannot be something determinate. But Philolaus goes a step further. He does not deny the indeterminate. He preserves it, but adds what it lacks. The second ground is symmetrical to the first, and this reveals the elegance of Philolaus's thought. Limits by themselves are equally insufficient. A limit with nothing to limit is an empty abstraction. What sense is there in speaking of boundaries if there is no territory to divide? What does form mean if there is no matter to give form to? If only limiters existed, there would be nothing to limit. They would be pure potency without actuality, structures without content. Something is needed on which they can operate, an extension, a multiplicity, an open field. That something is the unlimiteds. Philolaus grasped, with astonishing clarity, that the two principles demand each other. They are not enemies in combat, but complements in need. But Philolaus's deepest argument is the third, for it is not enough that unlimiteds and limiters exist. Their mere juxtaposition does not produce order. Two principles can coexist without relating, like two substances that ignore one another. A third element is needed to bring them into contact, to adjust them, to produce the fit. That element is harmony. And harmony, Philolaus insists, is no metaphorical concept and no aesthetic aspiration. It is a precise operation, the union of the unlimited and the limiter through numerical proportions. The musical octave is not beautiful because it sounds pleasant, but because it embodies the ratio 2:1. That ratio is what harmonizes two extremes, the low and the high, into a unity. The same holds for the stars, for the elements, for the soul itself. The triad ápeira péras harmonia is irreducible. Remove any one of the three, and the cosmos collapses. Philolaus's systematization was no internal exercise for initiates. It transformed Pythagoreanism, projected its influence onto Plato and Aristotle, and anticipated ideas that science would take centuries to rediscover. Let us examine the four main consequences of his thought. The first consequence is metaphysical. Philolaus offered philosophy a model for thinking complexity. Reality is not reduced to a single principle, like the water of Thales or the air of Anaximenes. Nor to a table of opposites as in primitive Pythagoreanism. It is an irreducible triad, the unlimited, the limiter, and harmony. None of the three can be eliminated. None can be absorbed by the others. The unlimited without limits is chaos. Limits without the unlimited are empty. And without harmony, both would remain disconnected. This triadic model inaugurates a way of thinking that will have a long lineage. Ternary structures will appear again and again in the history of philosophy, from the Platonic dialectic to Hegel's thesis antithesis-synthesis. The second consequence is cosmological and perhaps the most astonishing. Philolaus proposed the first non-geocentric cosmos in the history of Western thought. The Earth does not occupy the center of the universe, but revolves around a central fire together with the other heavenly bodies. It is not yet the heliocentrism of Aristarchus or Copernicus. The center is not the sun, but an invisible fire, yet the intellectual gesture is the same, to decenter the Earth, to strip it of its privileged place. When Copernicus, in the 16th century, sought precursors to his theory, he would find in Philolaus the first Pythagorean who dared to move the Earth. The third consequence concerns the Pythagorean school itself. By publishing his book, Philolaus broke the secrecy that had enveloped it for over a century. Pythagoreanism ceased to be an oral doctrine confined to a closed community and became a philosophy that could be read, discussed, and criticized. Aristotle, when he expounds and criticizes Pythagorean doctrines in the Metaphysics, is reading Philolaus. Without him, our knowledge of Pythagoreanism would be far poorer. The fourth consequence is the direct influence on Plato. Tradition holds that Plato, on one of his journeys to Italy, acquired Philolaus's book. Whether the anecdote is true or not is hard to know, but the marks are there. In the Phaedo, when Socrates discusses whether the soul is a harmony of the body, he is in dialogue with the doctrine of Philolaus. In the Timaeus, when Plato describes the formation of the cosmos from mathematical principles, he is developing intuitions he read in the Pythagorean's book. Philolaus's cosmology was one of the most solid bridges between primitive Pythagoreanism and the philosophy of Plato. And through Plato, those ideas would travel to the thresholds of modernity. Interpreting Philolaus runs up against difficulties that have occupied generations of specialists. The first is the authenticity of the fragments. Over 20 survive, but some of them, especially the longer ones, have been suspected of being later reworkings or even forgeries by late Pythagoreans. The debate over which are genuine and which are not remains open. The second question touches the very core of his philosophy. Philolaus speaks of unlimiteds and limiters, but does not specify their nature. Are they material principles, like the water of Thales? Are they formal principles, like the ideas of Plato? Or are they something else? The ambiguity has given rise to widely divergent readings. The third question concerns his cosmology. Philolaus postulated the existence of a counter-Earth, an invisible celestial body orbiting between the central fire and the Earth. Aristotle, our main source, suggests he introduced it only so that the number of celestial bodies would be 10, the sacred decad. But was that its only function? Did it serve any genuine astronomical role? The fourth question is historical. Was Philolaus truly the first Pythagorean to publish a book? Some sources attribute an earlier publication to Hippasus of Metapontum, but the testimonies are late and unreliable. The debate continues, though most specialists uphold Philolaus's priority. The assessment of Philolaus has oscillated between those who see him as a central figure of Pythagoreanism and those who regard him as one more link in a long chain. Carl Huffman, in his monumental study of 1993, placed him in the foreground. For Huffman, Philolaus is not just another Pythagorean, he is the Pythagorean whose work made it possible for Aristotle and Plato to know the doctrine. Without his book, Pythagoreanism would be almost as unknown to us as Orphism. Huffman defended the authenticity of most of the fragments and reconstructed from them a coherent philosophical system. Walter Burkert, the great pioneer of Pythagorean studies, took a more cautious stance. He acknowledged Philolaus's importance as a systematizer, but warned against the temptation to attribute too much to him. In his view, many of the concepts considered Philolaic, the triad of principles, the cosmology of the central fire, may have been developed by later Pythagoreans and then projected back onto Philolaus. Guthrie, for his part, offered an integrative reading. Philolaus is neither the solitary genius Huffman imagined nor the anonymous compiler Burkert suggested. He is the bridge between two eras of Pythagoreanism, the number mysticism of the 6th century and the rational cosmology Plato would inherit. Three readings that, at bottom, debate a single question. How much of the Pythagoreanism we know is the work of Pythagoras, and how much of Philolaus? We have reached the end of our lesson on Philolaus of Croton. 3 points deserve to be held onto. The first is his systematization of Pythagoreanism. Against the all is number of the primitive tradition, Philolaus articulated a triad of principles: the unlimited, the limiter, and the harmony that unites them. None can be reduced to the others. None suffices on its own. With this structure, Philolaus offered philosophy a model for thinking complexity that would have a long lineage. The second point is his cosmology. Philolaus was the first thinker in the history of the West to propose a non-geocentric cosmos. The Earth is not at the center. At the center there is a fire, the hearth of Zeus, around which 10 celestial bodies revolve. The counter-Earth, the Moon, the Sun, the planets, and the fixed stars dance in concentric circles governed by the harmony of numerical proportions. It is not yet modern heliocentrism, but the intellectual gesture, to decenter the Earth, to strip it of its privileged place, is the same one Copernicus would take up 2,000 years later. The third point is his role as a bridge. Philolaus took a decision that changed the history of Pythagoreanism. He published its doctrines. He broke a century of silence and secrecy, and in doing so he allowed Pythagorean thought to leave the closed circle of the community and become a public philosophy. Aristotle read his book and through it came to know Pythagoreanism. Plato acquired it in Italy and made it a source for his own cosmology. That is why we close with this thought. Philolaus founded no school, but he built the bridge along which Pythagoreanism traveled from the 6th century to the philosophy of Plato, and from there into the entire history of Western thought. For those wishing to pursue Philolaus and Pythagoreanism further, several works are indispensable. The standard critical edition of the Fragments remains Deals and Crayons, together with the relevant passages from Aristotle's Metaphysics and On the Heavens. As for secondary literature, Karl Huffman's monumental Philolaus of Croton, published in 1993, is the definitive work. It edits, translates, and comments on all the fragments and testimonies, and offers a complete reconstruction of his thought. Alongside it stand Walter Burkert's now classic Lore and Science in Ancient Pythagoreanism, which revolutionized Pythagorean studies, and the first volume of Guthrie's History of Greek Philosophy, which situates Philolaus within the wider context of Presocratic thought. In our next lesson we shall leave Magna Graecia and travel to Ephesus, on the Ionian coast, where a thinker of unparalleled intensity awaits us, Heraclitus. Against Pythagorean order, Heraclitus will proclaim that the principle of all things is change itself. We hope you will join us there. Thank you for your attention. Until next time.